But what's least known is that the original intent, long before it ended up in New York Harbor, was that it would celebrate the freeing of the slaves. And I got to tell you, I didn't know that until I was researching my book. I knew the other, but I did not know that. It's so fascinating to know that the French sculptor Frederic Bartholdi is the one, and he showed up at the dedication in 1886. He was the one that brought it to life, but he was at a kind of, I don't know, can you imagine some of these paintings of French garden parties? He was at a kind of a garden party of a fellow, quite a well-known fellow, by the name of Edouard René de Laboulaye. And he was a politician and a law professor, and Laboulaye was the president of the French Abolitionist Society. And that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Just thinking about that there's, in other countries, there were societies dedicated to abolishing slavery in America. Of course, you know, there was slavery all over the world, but by that point, they're very concerned about America. So he was head of the Abolition Society, and this was just as the war had ended, and they were celebrating, this is the 1860s, slavery is finally ended. And so they said, we need to do something really big to celebrate the ending of slavery. And that's when Bartholdi goes, I'm going to do a statue that celebrates that. And at first, his first models, he had, I mean, I want everybody listening to this to, you know, that got in your mind the Statue of Liberty, you know, holding the torch. Well, instead of holding the torch, the Statue of Liberty was holding the broken shackles, broken chains, representing that the slaves had been freed. So that was the beginning. But between then and when he finally got the money to get this thing built, and then got it was going to be in Philadelphia and the river, in the Delaware River, but they didn't get the money fast enough, and finally New York did it. But that was 1886. That was 20 years later. Reconstruction had been ended, as you just said, and the country was they sort of moved on, turned against the idea of integrating the freed slaves into society, and he was afraid that it would be too controversial. So he took the chains out of Lady Liberty's hands and moved them around her feet. So you have to really look, but the broken chains are still around her feet to remind people that that's what it's celebrating. But it's quite symbolic itself, the way it was put together and the way it had to be changed. And at the time they dedicated that statue, the Great Wave of Immigration was already 6 years. And day after day, boats were sailing past that statue, filled with foreign workers whose arrival, spreading out across the northern cities, was blocking the freed slaves from economic liberty. Now, you know, Kathleen, that I say over and over again, not to blame those immigrants. They were, you know, they had the opportunity, they came, but the leaders of America allowed it to happen, and they could see that the progress for the freed slaves had stopped in its tracks, and how sorrowful that statue from 1886 to the World War I, that was over about 30 years. Those ships were sailing and past, bearing the cargo, the foreign workers, that was reconnecting the shackles on the freed slaves and their descendants all across the South.
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, it is the onus, and I've said this repeatedly, Black Americans. Well, Black Americans who are the descendants of American slaves, not African Americans, Black Americans, must advocate on behalf of their own group. And they have to know this history. There's my music. We'll be right back. When we come back, we're talking to Roy Beck. His book is Back of the Hiring Line. You can purchase it on my website. You know what would be fantastic? If someone would buy all his books and donate them to the inner city schools in Los Angeles. Wouldn't that be a great thing?